Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Accommodating Neurodiversity in Employment. I am Christina Payton Rice. I will be your moderator for today. This presentation is presented by Michigan Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity and Michigan Rehabilitation Services. Just going over a few housekeeping rules. Please note that there is an American Sign Language interpreter being provided and closed captioning available internally through Zoom. Please use the question and answer feature to ask questions during the training. To access this feature, there is a question and answer button at the bottom of the Zoom interface. Today, we have 4 lovely presenters, 2 of which are from Michigan Rehabilitation Services. Myself, who is, again, Christina Payton Rice. I'm a vocational rehabilitation counselor out of the Southeastern Division. I am stationed in the Flint office. We also have Kimberly Meyer, who is our occupational therapist out of the Southeastern Division. She works out of the Carroll office. Our friends from Autism Alliance of Michigan is present today. We have Outreach Manager Jamie Xavier and Joanna Lofton, who is also the Outreach Manager. Now we will begin to talk about what neurodiversity is. We are all very excited to bring awareness on an extremely relevant topic, which is neurodiversity. I imagine some people have heard of this type of training or type of term, but may not be uncertain about what it means. So we want to invite you to, again, use that question and answer feature. This is a learning community. So let's jump right into it. Neurodiversity is an umbrella term used to explain the unique ways in which individuals' brains work. When I personally hear the term neurodiversity, I like to separate the word to better understand the concept. So when I hear neuro, I think of nerves or neurology or neurological system. When I hear the term diversity, I think of variety or differences. So when you combine those 2 components together, you get neurological differences. This is the essential premise of neurodiversity. It's that everyone is born with neurological differences. So if everyone is born with neurological differences, inherently, there's going to be a range of differences in brain functioning, including how some people learn, how others process information or their emotions. There'll be differences in how people think and differences in their behavioral traits, such as how they interact during social settings and how they respond to criticism. Again, neurodiversity is an umbrella term, and so it encompasses cognitive, intellectual, developmental, and neurological conditions such as ADHD, dyslexia, PTSD, depression, bipolar, anxiety, and autism spectrum disorder. Although many of the challenges and ways in which accommodating neurodivergent people may overlap in the workplace, for the purpose of this presentation, we'll be focusing on autism spectrum disorder. This is prevalent within our community, work sites, our schools, and vocational rehabilitation customers. Again, we're focusing on autism today, and we are so excited to give the floor to our friends at Autism Alliance of Michigan, where they'll help us get a better understanding of autism, how it presents, and how we can serve our community better for our neurodivergent friends, family, and coworkers.
Good morning. I'm Joanna. Thank you so much for having us. What we will be doing today is really discussing autism and how it affects different individuals. First, we will start with what is actually autism and looking at autism and what it really means for an individual. We'd like to use the actual diagnosis, what comes out of the DSM-5, so that everyone understands exactly what it looks like. When we look at autism, it is a complex neurodevelopmental disorder of the brain that is characterized by these primary areas: difficulty in communication and social interaction, repetitive behaviors, and with limited interests or activities, symptoms present before the age of 3. It will look different in everyone, but this is the primary characteristics. I'm sure many of you have heard of the term Asperger's syndrome. They no longer incorporate that term. When we look at autism, they really look at how individuals function. So there are 3 primary levels. The level 1 are those individuals who need some support. And the level 2 are those individuals who require additional support, a little more. And then the level 3, which is those who really require substantial amount of support in order to function daily. So what is actual autism? If we know that with an IQ or the ability to learn in a typical school environment may or may not necessarily be impacted. It is an invisible disability, which means that there are no outward signs that an individual may have autism, which makes it a lot more difficult to diagnose. Now the CDC says that it is actually 1 in 3 individuals, 1 in 36, children in the United States have been diagnosed with autism. That is an increase over the last year from 1 in 44. Boys are 4 times more likely to be diagnosed than girls. One of the reasons is because girls seem to be more social, and so they often get diagnosed later. Some of the typical social communication characteristics that define what an individual with autism may have. Eye contact, although they may not be looking at you directly, it's important for you to understand that they are still paying attention. These areas are difficult for them in a neurotypical way. So it's harder for them to get such things as sarcasm. Their tone of voice tends to be more of a flat tone of voice. Their facial expressions, you may see a flat affect. So it's often more obvious in social communication and in social settings. Behavioral characteristics. An individual with autism may have difficulties when it comes to being easily distracted and being overwhelmed very easily. We often see they have repetitive behaviors, and it's often hard to transition them from that behavior into doing something else. We've seen those who may play with the car. Instead of rolling it across the floor, they just want to spin the wheels. Ritualistic behaviors are very difficult for them to move from one routine to another. Transition changes from a preferred thing to do to doing something that might be a little more challenging may also show up in some of those behavior characteristics. Sensory processing. An individual with autism, often are either hypersensitive or hyposensitive in all of our 5 senses. Their sense of sight can be difficult and be also very acute. Their sense of smell can be very acute or not at all. When we look at the sense of smell, it can be difficult to be in certain environments because the smell itself is overwhelming. Sense of taste and touch, those textures of certain foods. So you will find it's hard for many of them to eat certain foods and will stay on a particular diet. So getting that appropriate nutrition is difficult. There are some therapies that will help when it comes to eating. Sense of sound. Many of them can hear extremely well or not pay attention to some of the sounds that might be in their environment, which could also cause a hazard for safety. Most individuals who have autism also will have an additional co-occurring disorder. And it may be that other disorder that is more prevalent than the actual autism. These are some of the typical disorders that you will find that individuals with autism may have. A seizure disorder is pretty typical. Attention deficit and hyperactive disorder is very difficult, is very typical. Feeding difficulties, of course, anxiety and mood depression. One that we don't talk about a lot is pica, which is the eating of non-food objects such as carpet or maybe bleach or wood. We don't see it as much, but that actually is another main issue with individuals with autism. Depression is very typical, and we worry about, in particular, those adults who often are self-medicating with alcohol and drugs. One of the myths out there is that vaccines cause autism. At the Autism Alliance, we rely on the information from the CDC and from the state's medical community. And the CDC published in 2013, due to the additional research showing that vaccines, those vaccinations do not cause autism. The study did focus on a number of antigens given during the first 2 years of life. Those antigens we know are the substance in the vaccines that help our bodies to produce the immune disease fighting antibodies. They did show in those results that individuals with autism are no more likely to develop autism due to the vaccines than our neurotypical individuals. One of the best ways of looking at the determination of whether or not vaccines actually caused autism was the study used to compare those individuals who are twins and whether or not autism is prevalent. When they were identical twins, approximately 60% of the time, an identical twins is diagnosed with autism. But in fraternal twins, there was no correlation. I'm sure you've all heard the phrase, if you've met one individual with autism, you've met one individual with autism. That is to say that although there are some typical characteristics of individuals with autism, those characteristics are very different from person to person with autism. No two people with autism are the same. When we look at the information, you see that 60% of individuals with autism will have an IQ score of an average to above average range. And only 40% of the individuals with autism will have a varying lower IQs. But that still does not mean that those individuals don't have the same skills and abilities. They will just vary within the degree. Now, let's talk a little about communication. When we look at communication with individuals who have autism, the severity does vary greatly from person to person, and the amount of supported needs that they will have will vary. The main thing is each individual with autism needs to have a very effective means of communication in order to function in society. Some of the ways in which we can assist them with communicating are visual schedules. Visual schedules are very helpful because it will help them order their day, or it will order the task of doing a task and then moving it over. It's a very simple process to show that once that's been done. You can also use communication boards to show, especially emotions, to ask questions for those individuals who may not have vocal language. iPads and tablets now an extremely useful method for an individual who can use them. Some of them are very simple. They can be extremely complex and carry on full conversation. Again, it's about what that individual may need. Social stories. Social stories are extremely helpful with individuals who may have autism because it does help with those communication needs. It can also be utilized to help model the appropriate social behaviors and teaching them how to actually to do what they need to do in different social environments so that they understand what to expect. It can also help them with talking because we know that individuals with autism often will have a particular item that they like to talk about, a particular subject. With the social story, you can help them to be able to take on the perspective of another person to help them with that back and forth communication, help them to respond to question and answer, how to help them also with responding in different environments. They're really good for teaching new skills and new situations. For instance, talking about death and dying, or going on a trip, or what to expect in that job setting. And let's talk a little about behavior. There are some challenging behaviors for individuals with autism. I think if you don't take away anything from this conversation today, the one main thing I want you to take away is the fact that behavior is communicating something. Behavior has a reason. It may be that it is meeting a sensory need for them. It may be their way of expressing a want or desire for a particular object or to go do something, such as they want to go and play on their iPad as opposed to doing the math problems or opposed to actually going out to do errands. It could also mean that they want to express that they want some attention from you and they don't know another way to do it. It also does definitely serve as an escape from a task or situation that may be too difficult for them to do. Some of the challenging behaviors that are very typical are the self-injurious behaviors. Some may actually bite their own hands until it actually bleeds, or we've seen those who throw themselves down the stairs, the head banging. It is really a behavior, but again, it's telling you something. Physical aggression, I'm hoping individuals understand that aggression is actually not an attempt to hurt you. It is actually a means of communicating, and they don't know how best to tell you either, I'm mad, I'm angry, I'm upset, I don't want to do this. Screaming, it could simply be the fact that they like the sound of their own voice. Some of what we have to do is be the detective to figure out what the challenging behavior is trying to tell us. Some of the techniques you can use is to move them to a more private area if possible. Being empathetic and letting them know you understand they're upset. Respecting their personal space. Giving them time to actually process what it is that you're requesting of them. Their tone of voice and body language, we have to make sure we stay neutral. If we escalate, they will escalate. So giving them some set boundaries so they know what to expect. Individuals with autism thrive on routine and structure. It helps them to understand what is going to happen next. They don't like surprises. It also helps them to understand what is expecting of them. And now for a last little wrap up. One of the main things to remember is behavior is language. Every individual needs a means of communication in order to function in their daily lives. It's a matter of helping them to find the best means of communication for them. Here are some relevant resources that will help you along the way with learning more about autism and what are some of the treatments that are available. Also, these are additional um, these are additional ways of verifying whether or not individuals with autism may or may not be on the spectrum. And these are ways in which helping those young children to actually be diagnosed earlier. That is the goal of Autism Alliance, is getting their early diagnosis so they will be able to get into therapy sooner so they can progress faster throughout the lifespan. These are also some relevant links that you will find will help you for not only a parent or a grandparent, but also for the professionals in ways of assisting individuals with autism. And lastly, this is our My Navigator program. Jamie, would you like to explain about Autism Alliance more?
Sure. Thanks, Joanna. So I can tell everybody a little bit more about the Autism Alliance of Michigan. One of our programs is called the My Navigator program. And we definitely want to inform as many people as we can. This is a free consultation service that we provide to individuals who are touched by autism and also family members who have an individual touched by autism in their family. So basically, anybody can call the Navigator phone number, which is listed later on in this presentation, and they will be assigned to, it's sort of like a case manager. It's more like a consultant, but they can connect them with services throughout the state. This is a statewide service. So this could be anything from a therapist who's autism informed, physicians who know how to treat individuals with autism and are knowledgeable about sensory sensitivities, insurance questions, independent living, really anything you could think of that an individual with autism may need some support with. And if we haven't dealt with it before, we're always happy to do some research and find new resources. We have a directory on our website where individuals can access it and see who the Autism Alliance of Michigan has already identified as a valuable resource. And again, this is a program that is statewide. So no matter where you are, any individual or family touched by autism can reach out to us, and we will work to connect them with beneficial supports and services. Then we have the MyPack program. This is one of the AAOM pillars, which is education. So our director of education created MyPack, which is a coalition between parents and attorneys that's focused on student-centered advocacy. So MyPack convenes regularly to identify priorities to address within the special education system and discusses how they can better advocate to improve special education throughout the state of Michigan. So if you are interested in learning more on how to become an advocate or join MyPack, or if you know someone who may be interested in joining MyPack, please feel free to share this information with them. They want to see those graduation rates for individuals with disabilities going up. Michigan is one of the worst in the country as far as special education in schools. And here is that contact information. That's the Navigator email address, as well as our phone number and links to our website.
And thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to share information on Autism Alliance today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Joanna and Jamie. What an impactful presentation. I definitely will take away so many things that you all talked about, especially the note of behavior is communicating something. We look forward to collaborating and speaking with you all in the future. And we're going to pass the torch to Kimberly Meyer, who is the occupational vocational rehabilitation therapist for the Southeastern Division out of the Carroll office.
Thank you, Christina. So my name is Kim Meyer. Like she said, I'm a vocational rehabilitation counselor working in the MRS Carroll office, and I'm also an occupational therapist by trade. So I like this image here as we transition into the workplace challenges and talking about accommodation. So this image here from Autism Speaks, I just like it as it kind of encompasses some of the common workplace challenges for neurodiverse individuals. So some common workplace challenges include, as mentioned by our friends from Autism Alliance, difficulty with social skills and social interactions, both with coworkers and supervisors. This can include difficulty interpreting nonverbal cues, the difference in conversational skills as a whole, and maybe an atypical affect. There's also a range in communication styles, whether an individual uses picture symbols, they write, they type, they point, or use partial speech, or maybe nonverbal communication as well. Other workplace challenges include stress management, time management, sensory issues, organization, and concentration. All right, before we go into more detail, I want to highlight the importance of language in the autism community. So as you can see on the screen, we have identity first language, where we say autistic person. And then we have person first language, or individual with autism, for example. So most individuals in the autism community prefer identity first language. However, when in doubt, initiate a conversation with the individual to go ahead and learn their personal preference so that you know how to best address them when working with them. And since we'll be focusing on ASD throughout much of the presentation, I did want to highlight that each autistic person has a unique set of strengths, traits, and challenges, all in different areas. And an individual's specific traits can present themselves as assets in the workplace. The table here outlines a few characteristics and potential strengths. An example being if they have a strong sensory preference, they may enjoy working in a quiet office. If they appear ritualistic, they may offer great attention to detail. If they're schedule or rule bound, they may be reliable. They will take their breaks on time and return from break on time, and also offer low absenteeism as well. Other potential strengths of autistic individuals that I want to highlight include a strong work ethic, trustworthiness, offering of different perspectives, and they may be willing to perform highly repetitive tasks that others may find boring or not really willing to do. All right, so neurodiversity and the ADA, I want to first say that it's important to address each case on an individualized basis when it comes to accommodations, as the functional limitations cannot be generalized to all individuals with autism or all people with ADHD. And then not all individuals will need accommodations to perform their job effectively. The degree of functional limitation will vary from person to person, like I mentioned. And I want to note too that these are common solutions that I'm going to talk about, but other solutions do exist aside from those to be discussed. All right, first I want to define a functional limitation for those who are not familiar. There's several definitions that do exist for this, but for the purpose of the presentation, this will be the one that I'll use. So it's a restriction or impairment in a person's ability to function in a way that falls within the normal range for the work activity. All right, before implementing accommodations, the employer is going to want to take some things into consideration. So some questions to ask are, what functional limitations is the employee experiencing? How do these limitations affect the employee and their job performance? What specific job tasks are affected as a result of their limitations? And what accommodations exist currently, and are all possible resources being utilized to determine those possible accommodations to put in place? And another question as well, do supervisors and coworkers in the workplace need some training? And once those accommodations go into place, we want to evaluate the effectiveness of those accommodations. So it would be important to meet with the individual to, see how those accommodations are working for them, and also determine the need for, do we need more accommodations to make sure that you are met where you are and are successful. All right. So the first accommodation we're going to discuss is for attention. Decreased attention and concentration in the workplace may be due to distractions that are heard or seen. Examples of potential accommodations include offering alternative lighting such as LED lighting, noise canceling headphones, the desk exerciser, simple desk organizers and supplies, a white noise machine to kind of mask any background noise in the environment. And then going back to simple, calendars, planners, timers. And a big thing I want to emphasize too is talking about worksite or workspace redesign. It might be beneficial to relocate the employee's office or workspace away from loud background noise, maybe to a more private area. And then to offer cubicle or shields, excuse me, to mask those background noises. And then the picture here shows a fidget device as something an individual could use. And then also the task flowchart really refers to just, a flowchart of daily tasks to kind of reference. And then task separation is really just coming down to making a cheat sheet of priorities of work tasks. Maybe the supervisor can give the individual a cheat sheet. It's like, these are your tasks to focus on during the day. All right, executive functioning. So that refers to the high level mental abilities that influence our basic abilities like attention and memory. So executive functioning encompasses a set of cognitive abilities that includes the ability to plan, organize, strategize, pay attention, and remember details, starting and stopping actions, and thinking abstractly. So some accommodations that may be put into place, simple things like checklists and reminders for daily assignments, using a color-coded system for files, projects, and activities. Job restructuring. So what that means is job restructuring can remove marginal functions to allow employees more time to become proficient in the areas of essential functions. Also, recorded directives or material could also be used, whether it's the individual is using a voice recorder for themselves to record instructions for their job tasks, or maybe the employer has a recording that they can utilize. And one thing I do want to go over for written instructions, you want to detail exactly what to do and give very specific instructions instead of what not to do. And then I want to focus on a job coach is a service that can be provided for this limitation. A job coach is someone who would come to the individual's job and help teach some organizational skills in the workplace as well. All right, individuals with ASD may have difficulty with managing their time, which can then affect their ability to set aside an appropriate amount of time for work tasks. It may also be difficult for them to prepare for or remember work activities that will occur, whether it's later in the week, month, or the year. So some accommodations that can be put in place, utilizing your smartwatch or fitness tracker for alarms or the timer features. Having, again, those checklists and reminders, as our friends from Autism Alliance kind of talked about the visual supports and those visual aids, because some individuals with ASD, they're visual learners and that's how their brain works. They see things in pictures. And that goes along with the task flow chart as well, giving that image for that person to reference. Having recorded materials and directives with those specific instructions. Again, color-coded manuals and outlines. And then there's also several apps for organization and time management available on our smart devices. Too many to really list here. Okay, accommodations for memory. So individuals may experience memory deficits that can affect their ability to complete tasks, remember job duties, or recall daily actions or activities, even ones that they may perform regularly. Some accommodations include, there's a break reminder software such as Stop Now, gives that an employee, that cue like, okay, you need to stop and take a break. Again, those picture cues or visual supports, using bulletin boards, labels, calendars, planners, electronic organizers that are similar to PDAs if you're familiar with those. Using checklists, written forms, and prompts, and then also giving that individual extra time for their work tasks. And I want to highlight one of the apps too for smart devices and our phones is Remember the Milk. So this app allows you to enter your work tasks, including the due date, priority, and if it's a task that needs to be repeated in the workday. So it'll send reminders, it allows you to make lists, and you can also share those lists with others. And it can even break down the tasks into smaller, more manageable pieces for that individual. Okay, I did want to include some scenarios when it comes to workplace accommodations, just to kind of help see how these are implemented in the workplace and help with application and learning of these. So in this situation, an employee who works in a manufacturing environment had difficulty with remembering the task sequences of the job. So once that supervisor and him had a conversation, the supervisor provided the employee with written instructions where each major task was broken down into smaller sequential subparts. And then each of those subparts was color coded for easy reference. In this example, for green for start or red for stop. Okay. As previously mentioned, Joanna and Jamie talked about sensory sensitivities, and I want to address that individuals may have difficulty tolerating noise and light if they have issues with sensory processing that may result in difficulty concentrating or managing emotions when exposed to noises that may be typical to others. So for light sensitivity, here are some accommodations that we can put into place. Alternative lighting, again, using the LED light fixtures. And one thing, whether it's non-fluorescent lighting or even with fluorescent lighting, there can be filters that are placed in the fluorescent lights to reduce the negative effects as well. And then we have the filtering glasses or blue light filters. And you want to consider to floor to ceiling cubicle walls to block the overhead lighting for that employee. And then for noise sensitivity, those noise canceling headphones, using a white noise machine as previously mentioned. There's a lot of overlap as you can see with these. And then soundproof panels. So that can ensure that little to no noise passes through from another side of the office or workspace for that employee. And then again, looking at worksite redesign to see if we need to make some modifications and relocate an employee to a low traffic area or again, a more private area. And a perfect scenario here is we're following up with noise sensitivity or sensory sensitivity as a whole. So this journalist with autism and ADHD experienced sensitivity to both visual and auditory distractions in the workplace. And what the employer did was provided a private high wall cubicle workspace in a low traffic area and paired that with a white noise machine to mask background noises within the office for that individual. Okay. Some individuals may experience hypersensitivity to smells in the workplace, or they may even have breathing problems that are triggered by allergens in the work environment. Some individuals may also have underlying conditions such as COPD, emphysema that may impact their breathing as well. These are some accommodations here. The biggest thing is you want to create a smoke-free and fragrance-free work environment, and such as including air purifiers and air cleaners. And I mentioned too, I know we saw this device on one of the previous slides from our friends from Autism Alliance, but also an AAC device can be used when the individual has limited ability to speak, or even offering an alternative means of communication for them, such as telephone or written responses. And some odor control products to mask odors in the office, and also maybe looking at implementing alternative non-toxic cleaning supplies as well to again create that fragrance-free environment. All right. Individuals may have a difficult time communicating effectively with their coworkers and supervisors. An on-site mentor can guide the individual through the social aspects of the workplace and even the hidden rules of the workplace. Positive feedback from a supervisor could be helpful. So the individual knows, okay, these are the areas I'm doing well in, and to make them, give them a little boost of confidence. Going along with that, a visual performance chart. So giving them that visual representation that may have stickers, lines, or bars indicating their positive performance of job tasks. And then individuals may also benefit from being provided with a written handout. So for example, there's a staff meeting coming up, their supervisor could give them a list of topics that are going to be discussed. Or if that supervisor wants the individual to speak at a meeting, if they know that they experience anxiety, that supervisor could give them some notice so they can kind of practice for that social situation. Also, even allowing the employee to provide a written response as opposed to a verbal response. And again, I want to highlight those specific instructions are important as autistic individuals learn explicitly, and they may require direct step-based instructions with no details left out and nothing open to interpretation. And again, I want to highlight the service of a job coach. This is again something that kind of can go with a lot of these limitations in the workplace. So a job coach will help the individual with their disability learn the job, perform the job, and can also get them acclimated to the work environment. This job coach could model appropriate social behaviors, or even, as mentioned before, give some social stories to reinforce their learning in their work environment. So for stress management, some accommodations could be referring that employee to the employee assistance program. These are free and they offer free sessions and they refer to resources in an individual's community. So these also assist employees in resolving any personal problems that may be adversely affecting their performance on the job. Some individuals can benefit from having a dedicated person or support person with them to help keep them focused, assist with day-to-day minor tasks, and help them operate in social environments that they may not feel comfortable in doing so alone. And allowing an employee to bring a support person to important meetings, such as a job evaluation, can help the individual ask questions, remember some talking points, and also explain the results of the purpose of the meeting as well. And support persons can be coworkers, job coaches, as mentioned, or even close contacts outside of the place of employment. And then I want to highlight too, a support animal. So in order to be prescribed an emotional support animal by a physician or another medical professional, the person seeking that support animal must have a verifiable disability and must benefit from having that emotional support animal as well. And some other accommodations I want to address. So there's several apps on our smartphones and devices for anxiety and stress. Some examples I've included are Talkspace and Worry Watch. And this image here to the right is a screenshot of Headspace. As you can see, I've actually used this one before, more so with helping me fall asleep. They also have, I believe it's free on Netflix, or if you have Netflix, you can use it. Kind of helps individuals with like some meditation as well for stress. And I've used that to help me fall asleep. And again, for stress management, having a supervisor provide that positive feedback, again, so that individual knows, okay, I'm doing well, and kind of decrease any stress that they may be feeling on the job. And another possible accommodation might be a modified work schedule where they have some frequent breaks worked into their schedule as with a flexible schedule, or even working remotely from home as well. All right, so following the effects of COVID, employers have become increasingly interested in finding ways to keep their valuable employees in their jobs. And also they want to have a better understanding of the costs associated with providing job accommodations. So I did want to highlight employee retention and note that if employers provide these accommodations, they can work to retain their valued and qualified employees. These are often accommodations that are easy to implement. They're low in cost. So I like to think there's low cost, but high impact in the workplace. And another thing too is to partner with agencies that can support the employee and the business. And I did want to highlight there's other benefits associated with accommodations as well. This is from a survey from Ask Jan that found that other benefits included improved productivity and morale, improved diversity within the company, and reduced workers' compensation and training costs. I just want to say thank you so much for letting me present today, and I will hand it back to Christina.
Thank you so much, Kimberly, for providing us with such a comprehensive overview of workplace accommodations. I learned so much from your presentation. I'd also like to just highlight briefly the importance of teaming and not only the employer providing accommodations, but coworkers. And coworkers can provide accommodations or assistance with our friends by sharing resources, offering support, and encouraging system changes. Again, phenomenal resources, Kimberly. We're going to take a quick peek at the chat and see if there are any unanswered questions. All righty, I do not see, looks like something just popped up. So someone says, what is being done to encourage more employers to hire individuals on the spectrum? Joanna or Jamie, would you all be able to speak to this?
I can speak to this. So
Okay.
I actually worked the Autism Alliance of Michigan. One of our pillars is actually employment. So we have a program called Upbound that works with both individuals on the autism spectrum and also employers who are interested in hiring neurodiverse candidates. So I can speak to what we're doing, which is the Autism Alliance of Michigan offers consultations with different employers to discuss the benefits of hiring an individual on the autism spectrum, which was touched on in this presentation. But there are a lot of specific skills that an individual on the spectrum has. Depending on the individual, but certain tasks like repetitive tasks that somebody may not enjoy, somebody on the spectrum that might be a great fit for them doing a repetitive task, or certain individuals on the spectrum may have like hyperfixation on certain topics. Again, that could be a barrier for someone, but for others, they could be very into a specific topic and then say, I'm going to go research this, for 10 hours, which could be a really large benefit to a company. We also have seen that individuals on the spectrum tend to be very loyal and prompt. So that's one thing that the Autism Alliance of Michigan is doing is educating employers on the benefits of hiring neurodiverse individuals, as well as the overall culture that was just discussed. 1 in 36 individuals is on the spectrum. So if you're in a workplace, more than likely one of your coworkers has a family member or a friend who's on the autism spectrum. And staff like to be in a workplace that is inclusive of those individuals because everybody can relate, hey, my brother has autism and I want to work for a place that I feel proud of and that he could come work. So if there are any employer partners or just employers that you work with that you feel like would benefit from learning more about hiring from the neurodiverse population, please feel free to tell them about the Autism Alliance of Michigan, and we'd be happy to talk with them.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jamie. We will certainly take note of Upbound at Work program and the Autism Alliance of Michigan for those employer and business resources. I see an additional question. It says, what can you do or offer support to an adult who will not admit they are autistic, even though they have been diagnosed more than a few times? Thank you so much for this excellent presentation. Learned so much. So what can you do to offer support to an adult who will not admit they have autism, even though they have been diagnosed more than a few times? Would this be something you'd be able to speak to, Joanna?
Yes, it's very difficult, in all honesty, when an individual does not want to recognize the disability. One of the things that we do suggest is getting that individual, if at all possible, into therapy. Maybe it is not just saying they are autistic. Often there are other underlying characteristics, and that getting to with that professional that can also help them to recognize it's not such a negative thing. And that's the problem with mental illnesses in general, is the negative connotation. The other thing you can do for supporting that individual is getting them into environments where they feel accomplished. Maybe it's an opportunity to show them other individuals who may have autism who are doing well. It's that changing that mindset. keying on what is their gift that they have and showing them that that gift is not a negative thing and how it can best be utilized. And also, we do have an actual listing that we use for, in particular, younger people, of individuals who have autism who are done great accomplishments, and showing them those people and say, okay, so it's not a bad thing. It's just really changing the mindset.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Joanna. I'm just looking through the chat again to see if there are any additional questions. I see a question from Barbara. It says, how does MRS help find jobs for the autism group? Kimberly, would you like to answer that question?
Sure, I'd love to. So one thing with MRS is that we serve the dual customer, meaning so we serve individuals and then we also serve businesses. And we partner with these businesses within the community. And so one thing too, even working with our vendors that help individuals become job ready. So we'll send them for job readiness, in which that they, learn how to fill out an application, develop their resume, their cover letter, all these kind of like soft skills that they're going to need in the workplace. And then we also will kind of give some information to the vendors as well when we have those consents and releases in place saying, this individual has autism. And then our individuals that we work with too, our businesses and vendors that we work with, a lot of them have training in this and they know how best to help the individual with locating employment and securing employment. And then another thing as well is coming down to a service that we could pay for and help assist with is a job coach that I mentioned a lot throughout this presentation. That's a big resource to use as well for these individuals. So I hope I answered your question there.
I think you did, Kimberly. Thank you so much. I do not see any additional questions, so we will go ahead and wrap up our presentation today. We would like to thank everyone for joining Accommodating Neurodiversity in Employment. We'd like to send a special thanks to Autism Alliance of Michigan, and we'd also like to thank our American Sign Language interpreter, Bethany James, as well as our captioner, Annette. If anyone has any additional questions, comments, or concerns, we will have our contact information listed below, and we will respond to you through email or other means. Thank you so much once again for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Of course. Have a good one, Joanna.
You
Thank you.
too. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye now.